Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to Cisco Canada's Virtual Kitchen podcast show, network, whatever you want to call it. We got a great show lined up today talking about restaurant social media. We got the social media guru on. Nate, welcome back to the show, dude.
Thank you, Jay. Very happy to be here. I think we're going to pick up sort of where we left off.
I got the list you sent me of all the things you want to talk about, and I like the first part is that you want to recap what we talked about last time, which I think is really good for our viewers. They're going to be watching the show, is to remember what we talked about last time. What did we talk about last time, Nate?
What did we talk about last time? It was a bit of a whirlwind, Jay, but in the last episode, we talked about the growth in social media usage, how prevalent it's become in Canada. We discussed, a lot of numbers and statistics that illustrate, just how important it is to potential customers and existing customers when it comes to making decisions about going to a restaurant.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be discussing, we're going to be furthering that discussion. We're going to talk about the importance of social media for restaurant marketing. And we're going to get into some of the specific platforms that I mentioned last time, where you kind of have to be. And I'm going to show you guys some really good examples of restaurants who are using social media very effectively to accomplish their goals.
Nate, do you find a lot of restaurants, I see more and more better posts and better social media coming from restaurants than I ever had.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great observation, Jay. And that's what, I think we're seeing across the board, just, as more and more people get into social media and as there's just, there's more users, there's more people doing it and starting to take an analytical approach to it. And I think that what we're seeing is, people essentially, for the most part, reacting to what works and what doesn't work, which is, a big part of it. And so, we're in the age of, content is king. And it really comes down to some of the ways that, you can leverage that for your restaurant.
Is that based on people just starting to understand it more, or is it people hiring companies?
I think it's a great question. I think it's probably a combination of both. Part of it is that people are, have more practice with it now, and also are, looking to others in terms of seeing what they're doing and what's successful. But I also think, because there is such an increased importance and role that it plays, I'm a statistics guy, Jay, and I love numbers. I was reading about how I think it's something like 75% of posts that are short video posts versus their static counterparts perform better. And when it comes to engagement and reach. And I think a big part of it is businesses recognizing that there is a lot more importance to it, and that they should invest in it. And whether that means, having someone on your staff who's either dedicated to it, or it's, a formal component of what they do every day, or if it's, hiring outside help or you can go all up to the agency level, but I think, there's a lot of social consultants, and just, more and more what it is essentially is the reaction to social media being a stronger place to play. It used to be all about TV commercials is the best way to get your brand and story to come to life. And, when you're looking at things like cost, reach, and engagement, social media has really sort of taken that to the next level.
Do you think, Nate, there's a lot of questions. I don't want to hit you with a whole bunch right now, but do you ever see us going back to long form video when you talk about social? Like everything's short right now. Do you think we'll ever swing back or find a medium?
It could swing back, but frankly, my prediction is that it will continue to get shorter and shorter to a point. And I think that happens, for a few reasons, but a big part is the reason that short form video tends to do better in social is just because of that limited attention span that we all, have, and the effect that
we all have,
scrolling through social, it sort of just furthers that, you really, really limits our attention span. And so, the quicker that things can move and come across, the better. If you think about the evolution sort of the way, social platforms have evolved, it started with text, and a lot of it was like load as much text as you can. And then, when Instagram did so well and eventually Facebook bought Instagram, there was the movement to images and images, performing that much better. And when you think about, that expression, an image is worth 1,000 words, it sort of makes sense in the sense you're able to just convey that much more, that much quicker, and with that much less. And so I think what's happening with video is kind of the same thing where, you have these long form videos that are great, and there's a lot of content in there. And I think, don't get me wrong, I don't think that those videos are going to decrease or people are going to be watching less of them. I think it's more about, in social, them getting shorter and shorter, trying to get them to watch the video.
Well, there's so much content out right now that it's almost hard to consume so much too, right? Like how do you take all that in without, scrolling or jumping on different things? And I think it's the same thing with restaurants, is that there's so much out there for restaurants nowadays. Does it become white noise to a point? Like, is there too much? Here's a question for you, Nate. Can you post too much for restaurants? If I'm a restaurant right now, can you post? I don't know if this ever happens. Can you post too much?
Yes. The answer is you can post too much. I think it's hard to get there. But I think, and again, it comes down to the restaurant. It comes down to the type of restaurant you are, what you're offering, what customers expect from you. I would say for restaurants, that threshold of too much is pretty high, as in, the more content you can put out, the better. The caveat and why I say there is a point of, diminishing return and a point where it starts to hurt you is if, you're posting too much and your customers and or potential customers who are seeing, your content, if they feel like it's not valuable or relevant to them, and if they view it as a distraction that is happening way too frequently.
And I think that's based on you have to have a good strategy plan for your social.
Absolutely. But I will say, I think that threshold of too much is pretty hard to reach. Like, as in, if your content's good and, it hits the three things that people want from a social media post and social media content. And by the way, those three things are entertaining, sharing information, or starting a conversation and engaging.
So Nate, I got another question here for you before we get into this other stuff. Is when restaurants post stuff on there, is there a point where, not that it's you post too much, but is there a point, I might have lost my train of thought on this. You got me thinking so much on all the different things here to ask you, because it's such a huge thing here, is I think restaurants, what's it do to their business? That's the question I was looking for. So, because we hear this all the time. They think it's just something you got to do. It's fun. It's not this. But have you heard what it actually does to restaurants when they do get a good following? Because I've heard some crazy stories lately.
I've heard of, a lot of times anecdotally of restaurants blowing up in a good way from, great social content that they're producing. and that's something that we can talk about too, and maybe I can, in a future episode, highlight some good cases of that happening. But to answer your question, I mean, we definitely see it in the statistics. I think I mentioned it last time that, it's a US stat, but 45% of diners who went to a restaurant in the last year did so because they were exposed or saw a piece of social content from that restaurant. And of those 45%, 25% went back to the restaurant because of either further follow-ups on social or content that, got them interested. So, wow. That's a pretty strong number. And so I was going to touch on it in a minute for Instagram, but 30%, according to Social Media Today, 30% of millennial diners actively avoid restaurants with a weak Instagram presence. So
wait a second, you said 30% avoid?
30% of millennial diners will actively avoid restaurants with weak Instagram presence. I mean, it's a subjective.
Oh, I've seen some
term, but yeah, exactly. You can picture what that is. And I mean, to me, that's pretty telling and compelling in itself.
Well, I just want to know, because I've heard some crazy stories just on the impact that social does. And I'm going to say I think restaurateurs understand it, but I think why I say that is I think the importance of having a strategy on your social, and a lot of people get scared. And we always say strategy in our industry. You got to have a strategy. Well, I think it's important because I'm quite active on social as well. And I find myself forgetting to either post on one side, what's the best time. Right now I'm doing a test this week on my social platforms with an increased social presence that I've been told to do to see how it works. It's like a test week for me. And I'm hammering stuff out there. It's crazy. So I'm kind of seeing what that is. I'm going to look at the results later. But from a restaurant, I think a lot of them may not see that yet, or may not be doing it in the sense of a plan to put out the content that makes sense, or when or what to do it. And I think that's important, because I just personally think you get so busy, you forget, oh man, I forgot to post on IG, or I post on the LinkedIn, or I didn't put a recipe. Like, there's so much to think in that space. I think it's important people know what they're doing.
Totally.
Have a plan.
Yeah. Have a plan. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the fail to plan to fail.
Exactly. Right, but I think it's important that people have a plan in that area. It doesn't have to be sophisticated by no means.
Exactly. I think, and you can the nail on the head. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. There's a lot of things you can just start doing today that go a long way.
Exactly. All right, so we're gonna dive into this stuff now, Nate. You ready for this?
We're gonna dive in. Yep, I'm gonna share some slides that I've.
Now, just wait, because I have people following me right now on IG, watching this live on IG Live, or IG. I don't know what they call it, IGTV still. Anyways, we're over there. So if you want to watch this stuff, because Nate's got some good stuff here, go over to Cisco Canada's YouTube page or Cisco Canada's Facebook page, my LinkedIn page, and Nate's going to show you stuff that will blow your mind. Did I talk that up enough, Nate?
I hope so. Yeah, I think you just about covered it. But yeah, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel.
That way too. That too, Nate. Thanks, Nate. Did you know, Nate, that I was told that you have to say that when you do these shows, because it does increase when you say it does
increase. I mean, basically, it's cutting to the chase in a lot of ways of what helps shows on YouTube, but also it really is a sometimes you've got to ask people, and but the benefit to following really is that you get notified when we have new shows and new content, and sometimes there'll be special engagements with followers, so make sure you like that. Hit that like button and subscribe.
Yeah, Nate, you can do that if you want. You can do the pointing if you like.
Love it.
We'll make you a
Awesome.
YouTuber today, buddy. Don't worry.
Yeah. So,
All right.
We good to dive in?
Yeah, go.
Wonderful.
The wheel is yours.
Okay. So, last time we talked a little bit about, what are the social media platforms that, you should be on. And the four that I talked about sort of as the main core, are Facebook, Instagram, and then Twitter and TikTok. And we talked about TikTok, being there primarily because of the, growth that's been happening in that space, and that it's, that it was skewing to such a younger generation, and now isn't doing that as much. But I'll quickly touch on these four platforms, and then we'll dive a little bit deeper into Facebook and Instagram. But we won't spend much time on Twitter and TikTok today, just to make sure that we, get through all the great content and can talk through, some great use cases and examples. But essentially, Facebook, it's the most popular social media site of all time, and can be a great way to interact with guests and share day-to-day information and updates. Instagram, great for visual storytelling through photos and videos, sharing and connecting with guests, and behind the scenes look, sharing a behind the scenes look at your restaurant. Also seems to work very well in Instagram.
Nate,
yeah.
Nate, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
Just the way it is so we heard this big thing of people, I don't want to be on Facebook and all this, or I'm leaving it, or is
Yep.
that really, because I know a lot of people talked it. I don't know if it's really the case. Is it?
A lot of people have said that they're leaving Facebook or fed up with Facebook. I've heard that too.
Yep.
I actually haven't seen a lot of instances where brands or companies have actually left the platform in a real way. But that said, like Meta does have a lot going on. It's worth paying close attention to. But to me, what it comes down to here is your customers and prospects are on Facebook. And if you're not there, they're still having that conversation about your brand and about your restaurant, and whether you're a part of it or not is sort of up to you.
Yeah, it's still huge. It's still the number one platform, right?
Oh, it's absolutely huge. Yeah, it is still by far the number one platform in terms of users and reach.
So when did Facebook acquire Instagram? Like, was it a long time ago?
I think it was probably in, I want to say 2013.
So it wasn't that long ago, really.
Don't quote me on that exactly. Yeah, I think Instagram rose to prominence around 2010, I feel like, is when it started building up. And I think the acquisition happened in 2013. I can check that and get back to you. And yeah, we'll get into both of those platforms in a second. Just, touching on Twitter. Twitter is really ideal for guests' engagement and communication. When you think about, what Twitter is really effective for, it's really effective for news. And it can also be a great way to announce specials or share quick news. So for example, if your restaurant needs to close for some reason, or there's, new updates, it's a great way to interact with new and existing customers. And as I mentioned with TikTok has blown up recently, taking it from an app largely aimed towards, a significantly younger generation. And it's becoming an established social media site. And for restaurants, TikTok is a very effective marketing tool, and it's a great way to showcase your creativity.
Nate?
Yeah.
Is there anything on the horizon of new social platforms that may be coming up or anything?
There are, there's really? A lot of entrance to the space. Not a lot of official ones, let's say, but there's a lot of buzz, particularly when it comes to new and mixed media. So, I mean, we can chat about it in a later show. But when you think about things like, AR and VR,
Yeah.
as those truly take the next step, think about what a social platform or social experience could look like in some of those mediums.
Oh,
So
Nate, you shouldn't have said that, man. My head just went spinning there for a
it's
second.
exciting. It's exciting times, and there's not a lot of detail out there, but there's
Oof.
there's definitely the appetite. Those mediums are going to become more and more mainstream and relevant. And based on both the hiring patterns of the top players in terms of, who they're acquiring, we can absolutely expect entrance.
Nate,
yeah.
I'm gonna ask you another question on this because I think it's brilliant. First of all, I didn't even think of it, but what do you believe? This is just speculation. That AI then will get into social media soon, if it isn't like it is now. Like it's.
I was going to say we're already there.
We're already there, but do you think it's going to be a point where AI will then become like a social site in a way?
It could happen. I mean, so I think there's always going to be creative people and marketers who are sort of directing or orchestrating that AI. Yeah. And similar with writers. I mean, it's a conversation that everyone's having right now in terms of, how far AI's come and, what's going to happen to writers and writing. And I think it's kind of a similar situation. But I will say it's already here. And, Jay, I know you did a show on ChatGPT, which is one of the biggest and most prevalent examples of AI, and is an open AI tool that I'm sure a lot of people have exposure to or are at least aware of at this point. But one thing you might not know is there a similar product in that line. I think it's GPT-3. Is actually something you can incorporate today to help with your restaurant in terms of, having a chatbot that leverages a lot of the tools of AI, and you sort of teach it how you want it to interact with people, and it can, handle a lot of the things that would normally be done by an individual or someone on your team. So, I mean, we can get further into that time because really we can spend a whole show talking about it.
I know. Well, that's a great subject because it's hot right now, and it's an area that I think is going to develop over the next year or two. We'll talk about it now, Nate. A year from now, it'll be a whole different world.
Absolutely. I mean, my take with most of these things is it's exactly that. You kind of there's kind of that period of where there is, a first mover advantage with some risks by, starting to use the platforms and jump in right away. But at the same time, like I would bet that, the conversation we'll be having a year from now is these are all mainstream and everyone's using them, and it's, what's next.
Well, there you go. All right, I will derail you again, Nate. Here we
go.
Oh,
good. Great discussion.
My mind is just fried on how
talk through any of these
crazy
things.
It's going to get.
It's going to get crazy, but it's also going to get great. And I'm hoping that, as we sort of talked about at the top of the show, that the content will just keep getting better and better versus the volume getting more and more. So, I mean, and so with that, it's a good opportunity for us to sort of jump into Facebook, Instagram, what the goal is, who you'll need, like, why be there. If you were talking about ideal times to post and how much to post, again, all that comes down to the specifics of who you are and is contextual. But at the same time, there are some best practices that, people find generally work almost universally. So, Facebook, really simple. We all know what Facebook is, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. But really, the goal is to build a community for your customers, and it's about encouraging page visits and comments. What I'll say there is Facebook is the most popular social media site of all time. It can be a very impactful tool to drive traffic to your restaurant. Your guests are active in the platform. Not only are your guests using Facebook, but Facebook is also collecting a lot of useful data about them based on their activity. And again, for better, for worse, we're not here to debate the ethics or moral component of these social platforms. But when it comes to businesses and marketing, that information that Facebook is constantly collecting can be very, very helpful. So yeah, in terms of who you'll reach, Facebook has up to, depending on whether you're national, international, local, but there's 2.89 billion monthly active users, which is also typically the way that people look at and assess the growth and also sustainability of these sites. Are monthly active users growing, staying the same, or shrinking? And when it comes to ideal posting frequency for Facebook, it's around 1 to 3 times a day. Again, that is, whether you're consumer facing or B2B. I mean, I know for our purposes, we're talking about consumer facing, which is why it's 1 to 3 times a day. But that's a ideal. If starting, and you're able to do 3 pieces of content a week in Facebook, that's a really good starting point as well. Jumping into Instagram, and Instagram is it's, first of all, it's officially the second most popular social media site behind Facebook. And it's also, for anyone who doesn't know, owned by Facebook. Instagram's likely where most of your target audience spends a lot of their time when they're on their phones, because it's inherently scrollable. And it was developed for mobile versus Facebook, which was developed for desktop and then made mobile optimized. So, that's sort of a key distinction between the two platforms. If your restaurant isn't already active on Instagram or isn't very active there, you're missing out on huge branding, huge customer acquisition, and huge engagement opportunities. As I said, it's a great place to showcase your restaurant's brand. And what works really well on Instagram is visual storytelling. Instagram has approximately now 1 billion monthly active users. So if you think about that relative to Facebook's 2.68, I think it was, you can sort of get a sense of the size discrepancy. And in Instagram, and Instagram is one where you can post too much if you're posting feed posts. And that's where, ideally you want to aim for 3 to 5 times per week. But that said, you can really leverage stories, right? You can post stories, Instagram stories, as often as you'd like. And they're easy, they're quick. You can post even multiple times per day. It's a really great way both to test engagement on certain things, and also, again, to sort of pump out that content, assuming it's good content, without risking, annoying your audience.
You could annoy your audience pretty quick.
Okay. You can annoy your audience anywhere, but I'd say Instagram is more susceptible to it than Facebook in terms of the way that people use it and consume it. Again, that's sort of scrolling through my feed.
Nate, have you ever heard of restaurants having like 2 or 3 Instagram channels?
I have. I've heard of it, and it all depends on what you're using those channels for, and how different they are. I would frankly, I would discourage it just from the principle of quality over quantity. I think you want to make it really, really easy to make yourself found and be discovered in these platforms. And I think sometimes having multiple handles gets a little confusing and can be tough for users. Again, where that sort of break would be is if there's completely different content among the different accounts or handles, then, and if there's a reason for that. For example, if you have, one that's separate for recruiting and employment, or one that's separate because it's, very, very specific, like to recipes or something else, then that's where, there are cases where it makes sense. But I would say better to have one account and handle that you market really, really well versus potentially spreading yourself too thin.
So 3 to 4 times a week, that doesn't include stories, Nate, or is that with
that does
stories?
Not include stories. So 3 to 5 times per week should, that's supposedly the sweet spot for what are called feed posts, which are, if you look at here in a second, we'll jump to some examples. Actually, we can jump to them now and start getting right in there.
Those are good stuff.
Just managing the clock, but there, you'll see that. So feed posts in the screen that you're looking at right now, those posts appear in what's called your grid. And that's, when people go and click your profile or engage with you, the first thing they'll see is your profile, but also your grid. They'll see like what posts are here. It's a great kind of way to see not
Nate,
just what people have posted, but what they've gone in the
Nate,
past. Yep.
Nate, the grid is this part down here at the bottom, or is it all the circles?
The grid is are the posts and photos at the bottom. The circles are what are called highlights, and highlights are a collection of stories. And that's basically Instagram stories are posts that are they don't go to your grid or your feed. They show up in stories, which is another way to interact. And stories, the main characteristics of them are you aren't seeing sort of necessarily everyone's comments. They can also be directed in more targeted ways. There's engagement opportunities and tools. For example, like adding polls is a feature of stories, and Instagram updates them all the time. But the main distinction is stories, unless you specify otherwise, expire after 24 hours. So they go away and they're not part of your grid. They don't become part of your grid. So if it's a great way, like if you're at an event or you're at a trade show or or you're having an event, or even just throughout the day, if you want to post a lot, it's just a really good way to do that. And what you asked about those circles on the top, those are what are called highlights, and that is the ability to collect stories and keep them for a long period of time.
Oh, okay. Those are stories then? So those are not posts, those are stories.
The row of circles are all story. They're collections of stories. So and that's something I can share some visuals of next time. But here, let's get into, here's a great example of Pizza Libretto is a Toronto-based pizzeria that effectively uses Instagram to showcase their menu and daily specials. What are they doing well? They have a lot of great eye-popping visuals. They do a lot of shorts and reels, which is why you might see those highlights. And
how many reels, Nate? Is reels different than posting, or is reels post?
Reels are posts, but they fall into a different category. You can think of reels as video. Essentially, that's what reels are. Reels are posts that are classified as video. And again, that that comes with some extra features and functionalities that aren't part of feed posts, similar to stories, and Pizza Libretto does a great job of doing those things and engaging with their community very well. In the example on the right, they get into the ingredients, and it starts with the dough, and they describe their process. They really want you to feel like you get it, you get what they're doing, you get what they're all about. Here's an example of Pizza Libretto. He's talking about a menu feature for the week. But again, those great visuals explaining what's on the pizza, how they make it, the ingredients, and you can see people are responding and engaged. And then the next example.
Nate,
yep.
Question. Sorry.
Sure.
Can you go back to that?
Sure.
Is this desktop view? Because why does this look different than my phone?
This is desktop view. Yeah, this is a mock-up.
Okay. I was like, that looks really good. I love that video, by the way. Love the video.
Yeah, it's you can check out their profile, but they do a really good job of.
Well, I love the fact that they're putting their chef and their owner, whoever that is you're personalizing the brand with people. I love it.
Absolutely. And the next example I'm going to show does that very, very well as well, and that's Vigils.
Hey Nate, I got a question here on my Instagram account.
Sure.
Melissa, thank you, Melissa. Can stories be rewatched or do they disappear?
By viewers, stories can be rewatched as many times as you want within 24 hours. Basically, you put up the story and it's in your stories section, and it stays there for 24 hours. And anytime that someone clicks your profile, your stories section, they'll be taken through your collection of stories. And stories are typically shown for 15 seconds tops, each one.
How long?
15 seconds, 15.
15 seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
There you
go. After 24 hours, they go away unless you save them and or collect them in a highlight. Is
there a reason behind that, Nate? Is there a reason? Engagement?
So the reason is engagement. There's a lot of reasons, but one of the primary ones is the essentially it probably started, and this is not a controversial opinion, but it's my opinion. It's okay. Stories got started and furthered as a competitive response to Snapchat. And the same way that YouTube Shorts, I'd say the primary driver was a competitive response to TikTok.
I'm sold on that, Nate.
So this example is Vigils, and it's a premium Indian restaurant in Vancouver. They use Facebook and Instagram to share their menu, events, daily specials. One thing that they don't do, and you can notice in their Instagram here, is you'll see posts and tag, but you don't see reels. And they don't do a lot of reels or video, which is interesting. That could be because of a capacity issue, or could be their style and choice. But is something notable. That said, they do have a great following, and they do social media very, very well. And what does that mean? It's they use a lot of eye-popping visuals. The food looks great. They do a great job of showcasing their atmosphere and ambiance. You can see the example on the right is one of their posts about being part of Dine Around Vancouver, a festival. But they don't just they do post the Dine Around or Dine Out graphics, but they make sure it shows their atmosphere, and I think building that idea, painting that picture of what it's like to be there and come there. So sorry, it's Dine Out Vancouver, not Dine Around. Another thing that they do really, really well is showcase and highlight their people, and also, behind the scenes content. That, you'll see things like this, posts like this, which, really show sort of that process, who's there, who's making it, and it's, really builds that community and connection feeling. Here's some other great examples
Beautiful
of
post.
them highlighting their people. Yeah. Celebrating awards, being added to the Michelin guide stop, but just making sure that, their people come through. And, I think, as the second post says, where the magic happens. I think they're a great example of, doing social very well. Another.
By the way, the food that they cook there is to die for, by the way.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's up there on one of my favorite. You bet.
I'll have to check it out next time I'm in Vancouver. Here's another one. This is Tres Carnales, which is a Mexican restaurant in Edmonton. They effectively use Instagram to promote their menu, specials, and daily deals.
Oh, wow,
yeah. They highlight. And here are some good examples. Again, you might be noticing a trend of eye-popping, delicious-looking images, high-quality images. And I personally don't believe that these are, necessarily taken by professional photographers. No. I can bet you they're not.
That's a good thing, Nate. Not to diss professional photographers. I think there's a place for them, but I think a lot of people think you need to go that way, and I don't think you need to. I think you use the phones today. These cameras on these phones are crazy good.
Absolutely. And, I mean, it's worth knowing how to optimize the camera you have on your phone. Yeah. Whether it's an iPhone, whether it's an Android, whether it's a Pixel. There's certain things that you can do, different settings, different filters that are really helpful. But as you said, Jay, phone cameras have gotten to the point where they're really, really great. And for the typical person, even business, they more than do the job.
They're incredible.
And I will also say a lot of the content that's shot, and Instagram sort of made this more and more popular, especially when it comes to video, shooting video in portrait mode, or the versus landscape, typically has always sort of been a frowned upon practice that Instagram really made more and more mainstream because of the format, and because that's how people scroll their feeds. So it's interesting, very interesting to me, when a tool or a product, is able to make a pretty big shift in behavior for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just still going, and another great example is Joe Beef. Joe Beef's a popular Montreal-based steakhouse, and they use Instagram quite well. So what are some of the things that they do really well? They showcase their menu, unique dishes. They highlight their overall dining experience. One other thing that they do that's pretty cool is they've really, because they are quite popular, and the experience, like they have developed quite a good brand, and that's taken them to offering a lot of merch and products that they sell directly from Instagram through Instagram shop features. And that's just a good example of they've built, I think they have 20.8 thousand followers, and they are very community driven, and all those things lead to people buying into that brand, and they're definitely leveraging that even further on social. here's some examples of some of their posts. Some of their posts, you can see, again, what works really, really well in Instagram is visual storytelling, high quality, high res images of food. And an example on the right of them showcasing their people, right? And bringing them sort of front and center and what they're all about. So, there's Joe Beef. The next example we can look at is the Chuck Wagon Cafe. They're a family-owned diner in Kitchener, Ontario. And they leverage Facebook and Instagram really well with their customers, and so it seems like they have a strong focus on building their community base, and I would say their content seems to both cater to their regulars, but also geared towards attracting new customers. There seem to be, some nods to their regulars, which I think is kind of cool. And I think, really adds to that community building focus. You can see, their Instagram, they don't have any highlights. So they don't have any story collections. But they make sure their info's there, and it's connected to their ordering. And then for them, it's sort of all the food and the experience, but, and you can see some of the captions are cheeky and are engaging. They ask questions. And so, there's a few examples. And then,
how much is the text important, Nate, on posts? When you write the captions on the bottom?
Captions are really less important in Instagram than, I would say, the visual. But it's all important. And here's an example of them creating TikTok content that's, I'd say primarily for entertainment purposes, that they're also leveraging on Instagram as Reels. This one's for, I think, a tip calculator, friendly. It says friendly reminder that most, if not all, phones have a calculator on them. But just that idea of making posts that are fun and entertaining, which is a great thing to aspire to. I mean, that said, I don't think you need to be fun and entertaining all the time. In terms of it really comes down to knowing your audience and knowing your brand. And
your brand.
Exactly. The next example is Chiang Mai, which is a popular Toronto Thai restaurant. They have, I think, 3 locations. And, I wanted to highlight a few things that they're doing really, really well as examples. They are similar in they're focused on the information, in terms of the about them. They have clearly curated some stories into highlights. You can see those circles, bar, guests, awards, and parking. And if you were to click on those, you'd see some of their saved stories that correspond with those collections. They have great consistent branding and imagery. They lean into their roots and community. But one area that we'll step into and I'll show, they do a really great job of user-generated content. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. So this is, Chiang Mai. Here's a good example of, again, great food visuals. That's almost a must in terms of what works in Instagram for restaurants. It's that visual storytelling, get people in, make them want to be there, want to eat the food, want them to get the experience. And then the post in the middle is a good example of, the way that they also produce content designed to engage people. So, the question is, what do you use to eat pad thai? Is it chopsticks or a fork and a spoon? and it's one of those fun facts. Thais are more likely to eat pad thai with a spoon and a fork. Why? Read below. So they're asking a question. They want you to engage with the post, and they're also giving you either some fun information or just some information that's relatable and related to them, that again just further that level of engagement, right? You want to click to read more. That's an interesting fact to me. I want to know why. I'm not going to spoil it. You guys can find them and read more. And then the post on the right is a great example of what I would deem as great user-generated content. And we'll talk about that in a second. But essentially, user-generated content is what it sounds like, is having your users or customers or guests generate some of the content for you. And it's about, I've broken it down into 5 key elements, which, we'll talk about in a second, but actually we can jump to right now. So, here's, and I've taken a screenshot included a screen grab of, their website, where they have a big call out for Let's Get Social, use the hashtag Chiang Mai Etobicoke, or mention Chiang Mai TO to be featured. But essentially they're telling you, we want to feature your content on social. Here's how to do it. So, and then, so I've sort of broken it down, trying to make it simple. There's really 5 key elements, 2 or 4 generating effective user-generated content. And, those are encouragement, right? Like inviting customers to share their experiences and photos at your restaurant. And that's by using hashtags. You can run contests or offering incentives like discounts or promotions. And again, it's really about, what will work to build that content. And, if you feel like you don't have the expertise or the tools, sometimes it's great to just incentivize some of these people who do it so well to essentially be ambassadors for you. The second component is collection, right? And that's keeping track of all the user-generated content that's being, I got to stop using the word generated in connecting this, but it's essentially, tracking and compiling all the UGC that's being assembled about your restaurant on social media platforms. So, you can use tools like social media listening or monitoring tools to stay up to date with what people are saying. There's lots of different ways to do that. And then it's about leveraging it, right? It's about sharing user-generated content on your own social media channels by reposting it, or by showcasing it on your website, or even in restaurant displays. If people are generating awesome, beautiful content for you, it's really just comes down to how do you use that. And there's a lot of great ways to do it. And then there's, the engagement piece, which is essentially responding to and engaging with customers who have shared user-generated content about your restaurant. This shows that you're paying attention and that you value their contribution.
I love it.
And lastly is measurement. And that's about tracking the impact of your user-generated content efforts. And that comes down to metrics like engagement rates, reach, and conversions.
Impressions?
You can look at it as impressions as well. It depends what the aim and what your goals are. Impressions is a contributor to reach, right? That's like, you can think of reach, impressions as the mass number of times that piece of content has been put in front of somebody's eyeballs, and reach as the individual, like the number of individuals that's been put in front of. For example, Jay, if you see in your feed, if you look at if it gets shown to you 5 times, that's going to count for 5 impressions, but only 1 reach.
Yeah. That makes sense. It is what it is. It's an impression. It's a
The key piece of measurement
it's a
is,
hey, get it.
essentially it's just helping you understand what's working and what's not, and helping you make informed decisions on how to optimize or adjust your user generated content strategy in the future, right? You might be getting tons of content, but maybe it's not what you want. Like, you'll see that with measurement, and then it's a great opportunity to adjust.
Cool.
Lastly, here's an example of Chiang Mai celebrating, their 4th anniversary with a reel, highlighting some of their roots and community and giving back. And again, it's just that sort of great way to build community. And you can see there's a lot of comments and likes and a lot of engagement around initiatives like this. And just so essentially, as we've seen from these examples, social media can play a significant role in boosting your restaurant's visibility and attracting new customers. By considering some of the tactics that we've discussed, you can effectively leverage the power of social media to engage with your audience and achieve desired results. Again, it depends. It's knowing your audience, knowing yourself, and what you're trying to accomplish. I would say next steps really are, take some time to assess your current situation and think about your goals for your restaurant's presence on social media. Is it community building? Is it, loyalty and, which, can be an important component of community building, but just, think about who your audience is and what your goals are, and go from there. With careful planning and implementation, you can absolutely chart a course for success and reach new heights for your business through social media.
That's it. There you go, Nate. That was a lot. So first of all, thank you.
I know that's
a lot. I think social media, I think the best thing that I always say to people is just get into it. You'll learn your way through it, and don't get too critical if you make mistakes, because I sure made a few. But I think just consistency, like you said, plan, strategy, all those components, measure, all those things to do and navigate this thing, because it is incredible on the impact it can have on your business. It really can. I believe.
One thing we talked about at the start of the show, which is just so true, and I almost can't emphasize enough, is it's always changing. There's always new developments. Even within the existing platforms, there's changes that happen, weekly, monthly, that add new features, and, new ways to interact or connect and do things. And so, that can be overwhelming for some people. But it's also kind of a leveler in the sense that it's always a good time to pick it up and, try something new. And as you said, Jay, sort of get your hands in there and start doing it.
I agree. Well, thanks again, Nate. And for everyone else, thanks for joining today. And I'm blown away, Nate. I wrote down so many notes and stuff. It's crazy. So thanks again. And to everyone else, we're back again tomorrow with Chef Peter on This or That. And Nate, thanks again for all the crazy valuable information on social media.
Thanks for having me on the show, Jay. Lots of fun, and look forward to the next episode.
Awesome. Anyways, thanks so much, Nate. To everyone else, have a great rest of your day, and we'll chat soon. Cheers. Oh, wrong button, Nate. There you go.